when I cut this piece, I'm not going to worry about this little angle right here. I'm just going to cut a strip. Let's put a piece of tape on this. Just to make sure it stays in place. This is another one of those places where it's a really narrow strip of fabric, so I'm going to trim the seam allowance a little bit thinner than normal because I don't want it getting caught in the sewing line. I really just want this one layer of fabric in that sewing line. So again, we've got a nice right angle, and we can put it in the right angle of the fabric. See, again, I'm not worrying about cutting these angles here. I'm just going to cut a strip. But when I place my paper on my fabric, I will make sure that the fabric extends past the seam allowance on the bottom. And up here, the fabric needs to be higher than the highest point of the pattern. So if I had placed the paper all the way up here, my seam allowance or my sewing line is covered. I have fabric past the sewing line on both ends, but my pattern piece extends up higher than the fabric does. So remember how we talked about mirrors? Well, this is another instance where that mirror image needs to be the same. So if my fabric does not extend in that same mirrored angle as my pattern, there will not be enough fabric to cover the pattern when I sew it. So make sure that if you have an angle that comes up and out like that, your fabric must also come up and out, or at least have enough so that it's higher than the highest point of your pattern. Here's another good example of the mirror image. Up until now, all of the pieces we have sewn that have been triangles have had the angles coming straight out to the side, so straight out to the right. In this case, it's coming up and to the right. Well, then our fabric needs to do the same thing. So this fabric matched the angle, and so we need to match the angle on this one as well. So this is the way it is in the finished piece, so we're just going to flip it to the right and put our pattern on that straight edge. So see how we have this mirror image? Just like we had a mirror image on this one. The mirror image still applies no matter which way your angle is pointing. And then we can apply the same logic with this piece. Now technically we could just cut a square. We could cut just a square out of this piece and that would work just fine. But this is a little bit larger of a triangle and it fits so nicely right in there. So I'm going to cut this triangle out. But then remember the mirror image. So in this case, our angle comes down. So our fabric does the same thing, just the mirror image of it. So see how we have the mirror right here. So that's A1. All the pieces are done. So let's sew A1 together. So we have some angles in this block, but everything goes together just like before. Let's do step 1 first, B to C. And these two intersections line up. We could even just ignore the corner and use that intersection to line up down here and use the corner at the other end. Now this is why practicing sewing right on the line is important, because if you practice to get these intersections lined up but then your stitching was not accurate, it's not going to line up. Your stitching must be accurate, your ironing must be precise in that you're not ironing any pleats into your seams, and then your intersections must be lined up. All three of those things work together to make precision. Step 2 adds B and C to D. So this is our first angle, but we're going to use the same pin and point method, just right at the tip of the angle there. Same for here. Down at the other end, right in that point. And then we'll make sure these two intersections right here come together. So we'll make sure that we have those correct as well. See what it looks like. Not bad. Then we need to add A to BCD. I pressed the seam in several different directions. Down here, there's one seam over here and no seams up here, so it goes that way easily. In the middle, I pressed it open because these are evenly matched seams. And then up here, there's one seam on this side and none over here. So you can press the seam in multiple different directions throughout one seam, and it will not show. But it makes it lie nice and flat. Just missed that intersection. I think I'll add a stitch. Just catch it a little bit better. I really only came over about 2 threads width, but it made that much of a difference. And then we have 4 is E onto that whole section. That was kind of an important intersection, I think, but let's see if I did it on the first try. Because I think these 2 lines meet up with these 2 lines. Our last step on A1 is to sew the 2 sides together.